But we are going to begin where else? In Beijing, where President Trump has wrapped up day one of his high-stakes summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The two leaders had an hours-long closed-door meeting, and Taiwan is emerging as a major flashpoint. According to a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, President Xi warned of potential conflict with the U.S. over Taiwan, saying it is China's most important issue. At a state banquet, both Trump and Xi touted the relationship between their countries, and during a toast, Trump invited Xi to the United States.
Tonight, it is my honor to extend an invitation to you and Madam Peng to visit us at the White House this September 24th, and we look forward to it.
Joining us now is CBS News foreign correspondent Coren, who is live in Beijing. Anna, there has been so much worldwide attention on this summit. It was full of pomp and circumstance, which we expected. Walk us through what we saw and what we maybe didn't expect.
Yeah, certainly a lot to unpack, Adriana. Let's start at the beginning, which is at the Great Hall of the People this morning. That is where President Trump was warmly greeted by President Xi. He walked down the steps and held Trump's hand for quite a long time. They then walked past an honor guard cheering children, and Trump then got a 21-gun salute. He described it as a magnificent welcome. Both delegations headed on inside, where they met for over 2 hours and 15 minutes, in fact. And obviously, the cameras were in for a limited amount of time, and then they left, and we got readouts from both sides. From China, it was on Taiwan, which I know we'll discuss further. But from the US side, it was about trade and deals, about Chinese investment into the US, about China buying US agricultural products, and about China opening up its enormous market to American companies. Well, from there, the two leaders went to the Temple of Heaven, a UNESCO historical site, where they had a walk around. After that, Xi met with some of those titans in US industry, those CEOs who obviously want to come and do business here in America, but in China, I should say, but have been facing regulatory hurdles. And then it was the state banquet. And Adriana, it was extraordinary to see not just Trump and Xi and members of their administration, but these CEOs from the US and from China. You know, these are the heavyweights of their industries coming together, drinking wine, sharing a meal. It really was extraordinary for all this power in one room. And, you know, President Xi, he made a toast and he said, "This is the most important bilateral relationship in the world, and we cannot mess it up." Well, at the end of that dinner, that's when President Trump invited Xi to the White House, 24th of September. So this clearly is a positive first step in resetting that US-China relationship, which, as we know, has really been filled with tension and mistrust for many, many years.
And Chinese President Xi Jinping had some very strong words for the president on Taiwan. What do we know about their talks so far on that subject?
Vlad, it shouldn't come as any surprise. We knew that this was the core national interests as far as President Xi is concerned. And we were getting all the commentary from analysts, Chinese analysts, that the number one issue is Taiwan. And sure enough, as soon as the cameras left, that is exactly what President Xi did. He drew the red line in the sand for his counterpart and said that the Taiwan question, which is how they describe it, is critical to US-China relations. But if this most important issue is not handled properly, it could lead to conflict and put the entire relationship in great jeopardy. Now, we got that readout from state media. It was interesting when the White House had their readout, there was no mention of Taiwan whatsoever. Later, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent came out and he said that President Trump understands the sensitivity around this, and we will hear more from the president in the coming days. But certainly for Taiwanese officials, for the government, they were obviously concerned by what was coming out of Beijing. But this is certainly not unexpected. This, as we know, is the #1 priority for President Xi.
All right, Anna Coren reporting for us this morning. Anna, thank you. For more on the president's high-stakes trips to China, we're joined by CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio in London. Ramy, one issue looming over this trip is the ongoing U.S. standoff with Iran over the Strait of Hormuz. How has that factored into these talks?
Yeah, Vlad, Anna was just talking about that readout from the White House, and we've got more on that. They didn't talk about Taiwan, as she said, but they did talk about the Strait of Hormuz and Iran. President Trump and Xi agreeing that the Strait of Hormuz, quote, must remain open and that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, that according to the White House there. But one China expert told me that, talking about Taiwan, Taiwan is to semiconductors, as we all know, as Iran, he said, is to oil, both massively important, both strangleholds, chokeholds for each of those commodities and for the world. And right now we're looking at lines that Iranian media reporting that Iran's Navy let a group of Chinese ships pass through the Strait overnight. So we're seeing this movement, collaboration, even while Trump is meeting Xi. I spoke with a China expert earlier on economics and trade, Scott Kennedy at CSIS, and he said a lot of stuff about Beijing's influence on Tehran, on what they could do and what they maybe won't do.
China could potentially take a few actions in terms of trying to put pressure on Iran, but I think their view is that their leverage with Iran in this context, basically survival of the regime, is pretty limited. And so they're probably going to tell President Trump, if you want to fix this, you need to yourself continue to engage in negotiations with the Iranians, and that at some point you're going to need to withdraw your forces from the Persian Gulf.
Right. So I think my takeaway from that is that he said, don't expect any breakthrough on this here. You're on your own, United States. Point to note as well, China gets oil cheaper from Iran, about a 10 to 15% discount relative to the global benchmark because of those sanctions. So it's also in the interest of China to keep the U.S. off its toes here.
Yeah. And telling that, like you said, Ramy, that Chinese ships were led through the Strait of Hormuz as this huge summit was underway. I think that signifies that China is not interested in taking a big stance or making a big change in its policy toward Iran as it pertains to oil. Thank you so much, Ramy. I have one more question for you. President Trump, last time he was in Beijing was 2017. A lot has changed since then. Explain for us.
Sure, a lot has changed since then. Looking at the general trend lines, I suppose, the consensus from the experts who I've been talking to overnight is that China is stronger, more confident. We can look at this across the board, politically, technologically, talking about AI, militarily. That's not to say, though, that there are major challenges, joblessness, especially with the youth, and social instability possible from there. The implosion of the property market that's been going on for like the past decade. Economic growth slowing to its slowest in half a century, 4.5% to 5% yearly now, when it was double digits several years ago. But all things considered, the vibe is strength. And we've got some sound I also want to play for you, also from Scott Kennedy, talking about China's push into AI, and also from last year, China pushing back against Trump's tariffs. Take a listen.
China's a lot more self-assured because of all of the progress that it has made in advanced technologies, and is less dependent on the U.S. In the first Trump administration, the U.S. imposed relatively low tariffs by today's standards, and the Chinese knuckled under and agreed to a one-sided deal in 2020. This time, they did not. And I think they did judge the Trump administration correctly when they pushed back hard on those 100+% tariffs. They got the White House to blink.
And that's the military side of things. That's the economic side of things. But the military side of things, I also want to point out, since 2017, China has, for example, doubled its stockpile of nuclear warheads. China then had one old, rickety aircraft carrier from the Soviet Union times. Now it's working on its fourth for better naval protection. And we've already talked about Taiwan. No word on that from this summit, aside from the main talking points.
All right, Ramy, thank you very much for reporting.